Since the start of 2013, I have been hooked on the Battlefield series. Thanks to these games, I've met lots of new people from all walks of life, discovered more about the franchise and how it came to be what it is, and of course, to this day, still keeping in touch with what's next for this franchise. Quite recently, however, I've been asking myself, given that Battlefield is one of my favourite franchises of all time, which specific game stands out in my mind as the best one? The game that represents and defines what Battlefield is. And after going back down the memory lane of all the games, I personally think that that game is Battlefield 3. And rather than just putting on the nostalgia goggles and sail my way right through this bitch, I've given this game a good 15 plus hours of playtime over the last few weeks, to see if it really does hold up by today's standards. Now, I wasn't initially going to talk about the single player campaign for Battlefield 3, but I do remember not being very impressed the first time around, so I decided to refresh my memory a little bit with why exactly I felt that way. Now, I must say, the campaign was a lot better than I gave it credit for. There are flaws, don't get me wrong. There's one too many QTE sequences, the main line of characters aren't very memorable, and it is quite short, only about 4 hours long. But the storyline and the setup is what makes it shine. The idea of several rogue members of government working together to steal 3 nuclear devices from Russia and then selling them to this terrorist group called the PLR. If the bombs explode, the CIA and the FBI will probably launch an investigation and conclude that the blast shields match Russian specs, so by that point it's more than likely that they will declare a war on them. The campaign does have many standout moments like the earthquake, the tank mission, and of course the fighter jet mission. Battlefield 3's campaign to me was the last Battlefield campaign that felt distinctly different from its multiplayer component. In most recent titles it just felt more like multiplayer games with bots. Many maps are just sections of the multiplayer maps themselves. It's just the little details in Battlefield 3 that help. The much more slower paced sections like giving your squad mates a boost to reach a higher point, exploring a very ghostly city at nighttime after the earthquake, and that scene on the rooftop where you have to slowly move from cover to cover until you get into a position where you can take out the sniper. At the time of its release though, I can see why many people were slagging the campaign off because of the America versus Russia type storylines were being milk dry by that point. And today we've kind of slowly been stepping away from that trope a little bit. So looking back on it now, it actually feels like a well-crafted storyline, but it's not as good as COD's Best or say the Bad Company games. Now, one thing about Battlefield 3 that I would love to gush about for a while is the co-op missions, but unfortunately during my revisit to the game I was unable to persuade any friends of mine to actually reinstall the game and team up with, so instead I just looked them up online and relived those missions through videos. And my personal 2 favourites were Fire from the Sky, which was the one where you have a chopper, one piloting, one gunning. Also, I found it funny as well that the video that I found, the 2 guys playing were actually having the same conversation that I remember me and a friend had the first time we played that mission.
I'm glad you. Who's flying?
Oh.
Are you kidding me?
What?
Are we in the same helicopter or no?
I don't know, maybe.
Oh god. I don't know how to fly this.
Are you flying?
Yeah.
Oh god. I'm dead.
The other most memorable one was Drop 'em Like Liquid, where you have to save some hostages at night with silent snipers. It gave me a lot of vibes from All Gillied Up from Call of Duty 4. Make sure that you both hit your target at the same time, and if one of you chokes, it's game over. I think why I remember this mission so well is because of that achievement that we struggled for so long to get. It was called Bullseye, where you had to complete the mission without being detected. And during this journey, is what I'm going to refer to it as, was a back and forth between me and a friend who just kept missing our shots that cost us the game. It wasn't like I was having a teammate hold me back. Let's just say there's some moments in life you want to forget. Now, can anyone else guess the kind of multiplayer match I joined for my first game back? Now, we all remember this being the most chaotic, explosive, fast as flash experience to exist that wasn't directed by Michael Bay, but in a really good way. I suppose because my mentality going into these TDM matches was just play more social. When I get a squad together, I would want to take it a bit more serious with the communication, being in sync with one another, and etc. I think that's why Narshar Canals became such a fan favourite. Personally, I can't think of any other Battlefield map since Battlefield 3 that wasn't memorable for TDM. Maybe it's because I never really tried it much afterwards, but I remember Narshell just perfected its layout for players who just wanted to take it in their stride and not have to worry about squad play. Another big standout that was included in Battlefield 3's multiplayer was Rush. One map in particular, and is it as good as I recall? Yeah, it was pretty awesome. As far as we know, Rush is not going to be included in Battlefield 5. Even though I hardly played it in Battlefield 1, it still kinda sucked. Down Van Peak really isn't a good conquest map, but it's hands down the best Rush map. Now, why is Down Van Peak hailed as one of the greatest Rush maps? Here's a simple guide. Well, we start off by assaulting downhill on 2 small bases, with the defenders given a little bird and the attackers just 1 additional jeep. Complete that, the attackers are rewarded with a transport helicopter, and players will have to perform what I think is probably one of the biggest money shots in the franchise, the base jump. We land within what's called the Factory Valley. One objective is inside the building, while another is hidden amongst a mix of containers. Get past them, and we have to push up into the tunnel, which pretty much takes helicopters right out of the game. Now it's all up to the tanks, as both teams get one. Now you've got options. Do you use the side hallways to flank, or do you stay behind the tanks as it pushes forward? And then finally, you reach the other end of the tunnel and enter the mining camp. It offers plenty of options with its bumpy terrain. Now, just comparing the start of the map to the end of it, it feels like a completely different map. It really does feel like a journey. The game forces you to have things planned out for every time you move up or get pushed back. And that is just something I've never felt in the recent Battlefield games. Don't get me wrong, I still love Conquest, and I think DICE have made today's maps much more centered around that mode. And then when it comes to Rush, they just put the MCOM placements in the best place they can find, not necessarily an area that was specifically designed for them to be. It just feels tacked on these days. And while removing Rush in Battlefield 5, or at least not including it at launch, can be argued if it was for the best or not, but just looking back when I thought Rush was great and why it was so great, it's a real shame. Now, I never got around to buying Premium for Battlefield 3, so I cannot elaborate on how I felt about its DLCs compared to other games, but after spending a good few weeks trying to replay as much of this game as possible, I can say that Battlefield 3 definitely, in my mind, has the best collection of vanilla maps. So, let's just look at the last 3 mainline Battlefield games, the ones that I've played a lot since I've been into this franchise. Forget that Cops and Robbers one. So each of them had 9 maps. Battlefield 4 had 9 good maps for Conquest, and only 2 half-decent ones for Rush, that being Golmud Railway and Paracel Storm. Battlefield 1 had 4 good Conquest maps, and 5 good Operations. Battlefield 3, 8 good Conquest maps, and 7 good Rush maps. Maps like Caspian Border, Karg Island, Insane Crossing, Grand Bazaar as well, are all just such achievements from the map designers at DICE, for being able to craft these maps that work so well in both of the modes, Conquest and Rush. So if we tally up the numbers, BF3 holds the most points in my rating, but I tried to see if I could get a more clear answer from the community on what the best collection of premium maps is, on Reddit, of all places. So after doing my day-to-day browsing on the latest memes, I headed over to the Battlefield subreddit and posed the question. Now, as I probably expected, I got a good mix of answers, each given pretty fair points on each title. Well, I'm kind of disappointed really. I was kind of hoping that everyone would say Battlefield 3 so I could push my agenda a bit further in this video. Battlefield 3 wasn't without its flaws though. There have been many improvements DICE have made in recent games from this. The minimap, for example, is your best friend. Gives you way more information than I even liked it. You can often have some unfortunate spawns on squad mates at times. Grenade spam was a bit of a problem. You climb ladders slower than the stand of stair lifts that are used for old people. The sun glare, and of course the f***ing suppression. I completely forgot how bad this actually was. A good old friend of ours, Frankie, has some pretty good inside information on how this came about.
But of course, DICE needed room to improve Battlefield 3, so people would buy Battlefield 4. And one day, at the DICE offices, a careless DICE coder accidentally spilt margarine all over his computer screen. True story, bro. And that revelation was the birth of Battlefield 3 suppression.
Now this is a strange thing to admit to in a video that's titled Why Battlefield 3 was my favourite Battlefield game. But in today's world of gaming, Battlefield 4 probably stands out as the best game by today's standards of modern gaming. Obviously I can play up to 64 players in a server, and some of Battlefield 3's controls felt a little bit awkward, like having to press the select button to spot people, and this is obviously a console thing. I'm sure you PC players may not share that opinion. But the reason I think Battlefield 3 is still the best is because when I look back to when I first booted it up in 2013, everything was so new to me. I'd never played a game like it before. And even for the veterans of the franchise, it was a big step up in terms of pacing from the much more linear design from the Bad Company games, and even the pacing from Battlefield 2. Battlefield 4 had a very similar gameplay formula to Battlefield 3, so that element of surprise, I don't want to say was ruined, but I just wasn't as stunned. And not to mention, of course, Battlefield 4 launched pretty broken, and it took a good year before it was worth playing, so I ended up going through the best bits of the game the hard way, and by the time it was ready to be played again, I experienced everything I needed to. So I could potentially be saying Battlefield 4 is the best in the series if it had launched under slightly different circumstances. Battlefield 1 was the same story, except it didn't release broken. The maps and the lack of weapons just pulled it down a little bit for me. So that breath of fresh air I felt when I started playing Battlefield 3 just took me way more by surprise, more than any other title. And now 5 years later, I hope we will soon again see another big revelation for the series. But what that will be, I'll leave that for you guys in the comments. I was pleasantly surprised that people, even after 7 years, are still coming back to play this game. It kind of makes me wish that every now and then DICE would do this announcement on Twitter or something that they're going to have a throwback community play together sort of thing. Kind of like the Friday Night Battlefield you see every now and then, but it doesn't seem like that is ever going to happen. So, I'm going to regret this. But I'm going to do one myself. On Thursday the 25th of October at 8:30 PM GMT, I am opening up my squad for you guys to come and play some Battlefield 3 with me. If you have an Xbox and a copy of Battlefield 3, hit me up with a message maybe 20-30 minutes before we start and I'll bring you in. If we get too many people in one squad, don't worry, I've got it covered. What I will do is separate you into parties of 3, and after each game I will switch between parties so you can all have a game with me. It won't be like a 16-man party screamfest. It'll just be you and your squad. Parties will be set to invite only, so if you want to play you'll have to message me. It sounds like a lot of lead for me to manage, but I honestly think it'll be fun. So I hope you guys can come along to that and join, kick some ass on Battlefield 3. Also, Red Dead Redemption 2 comes out on Friday, so this will be my last hurrah before I lose touch with society. I was asked by a few friends of mine when I told them I was going to do a Battlefield 3 video, isn't this a bit irrelevant? Are people going to care? But I would argue that when talking about your favourite game for a series that is still ongoing to this day, you always want to point out what made the best the best. Let ideas in your mind run wild with whatever new creative vision you can think of that could be brought to life in Battlefield 6. So it is never irrelevant to talk about your favourite game from a certain franchise. It could possibly be one of the most important. So you guys take care of yourselves, hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you all hopefully on Thursday night. Take care.